Hi, everyone, and welcome to the weekly, I was going to say the weekly wrap, the weekly Fireside Chat podcast. That's the name, the Fireside Chat podcast. Happy to be here with you. I think, some interesting things that I want to talk about with you, but if you permit me to just go over a couple of administrative things that Tracy just reminded me of before I started. I'm going to put up a post to make this announcement formal so everyone can see it, and I know we'll get it in the on the forum as well. But Tracy and I will do a members live AMA Ask Me Anything this coming Thursday. That will be November 21st. Let's see, today's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So that's I think the 21st. I don't have the calendar in front of me. This Thursday. And it will be 7 o'clock Eastern time. So I know a number of you, particularly those of you in California, 5 o'clock Eastern is not convenient. 7 is not a lot more convenient because that's only 4 Pacific time, I realize. But I'm trying to move things to a slightly more convenient time for you without screwing over everyone on the other side of the Atlantic. Who are 5 or 6 hours ahead of Eastern time. So it's tricky. And then to say nothing of the folks in Australia, look, you guys are just screwed. There's no way I can't get a time that's going to work for you unless it's just sheer luck. So, but I think 7 actually Eastern, that should be good for the Aussies as well. Trying to keep everyone happy. For the record, later that night, I'm going to go live on Jimmy Church. I'll make an announcement on that too as a post, but you can check that out. And I just talked with Jimmy on the phone yesterday. I'll tell you about that in a minute. So anyway, the AMA is the main thing. The other thing Tracy wanted me just to mention is that we're having some issues with the calendar on our site. And I'm not on top of all of the technical issues happening with that calendar, but I know that it is giving her grief. We do like to keep things updated on that for you, and it's not working very well. We are looking into it. Tracy's looking into it. I know she's talking with Evelyn, our web guru. I imagine we'll get it fixed. So those are a couple of the other things. Forum's looking great. I haven't really commented, but I have been I've been lurking, checking out some of the discussions there, which are, as always, just fascinating. And by the way, what I've noticed is that some of you on the site love going into the forum, and some of you not really. That's not your thing, and that's fine. So you don't have to go into the forum. The one thing about it that is really great, though, is it's just a fantastic place just to peruse. You don't even have to participate, just to go through the discussions that are there is a tremendous education for me, and I'm sure for every one of us. So if you haven't checked it out, I would say make use of it. It's there. It's part of your membership, and it is an amazing place. It's beyond actually anything that I had hoped. And I had pretty good hopes for it, and it's just vastly surpassed that. As far as what I've been up to, I'm going to do a quick overview of that, and that's going to launch me into some themes that I think are important. So this week, as if you've been looking at the site, you know that I posted an interview that I did with Christopher Bledsoe. Chris is interesting. He's a really interesting guy. Lives in North Carolina. He's been a long time experiencer of the UFO phenomenon, if that's in fact what he's experiencing. He's got his own thoughts on this. And so we're doing a multiple part interview conversation. Unlike my interview with Philip Lavelle, which, by the way, there'll be more parts of that you'll see this week. The interview I did with Philip was all in one sitting. We sat for, roughly speaking, all in one day. And we did do a follow-up pickup via Skype like a week later. But basically, the interview I did with Philip was in one sitting. This is different with Chris. So I did an initial hour-long interview with Chris Bledsoe. That's been posted on our site. That will go live on YouTube Monday night. 8 o'clock Eastern. I think 8 o'clock Eastern. We'll make it go live. It will go on KGRA a week later, but right now we're going to have it on YouTube. But you guys have had it first, and I hope that you've had an opportunity to listen to it. I was really, really happy with this interview with him. We had a very kind of low-key, very calm, mellow conversation about the the one experience that really put him on the map in terms of the UFO community, the so-called river incident or the river sighting. And he was with 4 other people, including his son, who was 17 years old at the time. This is back in 2007. And 3 other individuals, and he talks all about it. Now, if you've, really on top of this, the history of the UFO subject, you probably know all the details of that. That encounter has been written about for quite some time. MUFON did an investigation back in 2008. But anyway, so part 1, we really get into all of the particulars of that event, and I really needed to focus on it. He and his son both appear to have seen an alien being, or beings, plural, in the case of his son. So I just recorded part 2 with Chris yesterday. Was it yesterday? Yes, it was. Yes, I'm losing track of the days. And I'm really happy with how this is going. I expect to be able to drop that to the site for you maybe tomorrow. Certainly, I don't think later than Tuesday. I want to get that out. And we're going to do a 3rd part, and after the 3rd part, we'll see where we're sitting here, and if we want to do any more. We're doing at least 3 parts. So the part that we just recorded yesterday, I'm really running this. He's letting me, and I'm kind of asking him what he thinks is important, but I've decided, so part 1, I wanted to do the river incident. Part 2, I wanted to do all of the aftermath of that. The MUFON investigation, something that he's a very polite man, but he was very unhappy with how MUFON handled this. And his main critique was of the MUFON director at the time, James Carrion. And there's no trash talking involved here, obviously, but it's clear that he was unhappy and that there may have just very well been an agenda to discredit him as part of that investigation. We get into it. So you're going to hear us, pardon me, talk about that, as well as how this affected his family, his kids, and then other incidents, other sightings that happened in the course of that year by his family, not just by him. It's a really interesting conversation. We're going to go into the 3rd part this week. We'll set up a day to do this, and we're going to talk about his encounter with what has become known as the Lady. And this is another famous incident. This happens in 2012 on Easter. There's a lot of, this is not just a typical UFO kind of a case. Those of you who are familiar with the work of Mike Cleland, who's a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, I published 2 of his books, who wrote The Messengers. Mike is known as the Owl Guy. There's a lot of deep, deep symbolism in the experiences that Mike researched in his book. And Chris Bledsoe's case, particularly with the Lady, but really all of them, is like right out of that whole tradition. And in fact, he has his own story of his own owl, very, very important owl experience. And in fact, we talked about that, and I'm going to make that a members only recording. I'll just sift through that, and I'll be able to have some of that for you. This is just some fascinating stuff. The thing about Chris, I've commented on this in the public interview, and I mean, it just keeps coming back to me, is this, there's 2 elements here that make his case so powerful. One is the absolutely, let's say, fantastic nature of the claims of what he has experienced. And if you were just only to have those claims by themselves, I think that there are at least some people who would have a real problem accepting some of the things that he's talked about, you just think, my God, everything happens to you. How is this possible? But the problem with holding that position is, you talk to this man and I will just say, like, you can tell this is a genuine, decent human being. But on top of that, there's a lot of people who seem like they're decent human beings, and they can fake you out, and they can not be telling the truth. But in Chris's case, he's had so many people who have gone to his property to investigate him and have come back having had sightings themselves, experiences. My friend and colleague, Chase Kletsky, saw, and is absolutely adamant about this, saw an alien being in the night during an investigation at his property. We're going to talk about that. I might be able to get Chase on here. She's talked about it a few times. This is a really profound experience for her. Then there's an experience that Grant Cameron had back in, I believe it was 2013, when he was seeing Chris. I think we'll get into that. I'll let Chris talk about that. John Alexander, my sometime nemesis in the UFO field. I actually had a radio debate with John back in 2011. Is there a UFO cover-up and all of that? John and I have not always seen eye to eye, but the fact is John Alexander is legitimately interested in a lot of fringe, weird, paranormal things, and he visited Bledsoe's property, and Chris took him around, and John Alexander had his own bizarre sightings and experiences, and I'm going to get Chris to talk about that in perhaps in the next podcast that I do with him. So that's the thing. You've got these fantastic claims here, but you've also got a lot of support. In the river incident, there were the other three guys that he and his son were with. They were not easy to find, by the way. MUFON eventually found them. These guys were not looking for publicity, but they all supported everything that Chris and his son had already talked about. So and this happens with all of the cases. In the interview that I did with him yesterday, we talked about the polygraph that he supposedly failed. And I was really glad that I got him to talk about that. This is like right out of the Travis Walton case. Back in 1975, Travis also failed his first poly. Now, in that case, I looked into that. I have I guess I could say a partial transcript of that polygraph. It's in the APRO Bulletin, if I'm not mistaken. That's where I read it. And the Lorenzens, Coral and James Lorenzen, wrote about this at the time, and they were horrified at the absolutely unprofessional nature of that polygraph examination back in 1975. Talking to Chris about his polygraph examination, it seemed like a very similar thing. There are definite irregularities in the conducting of that polygraph. I've learned just from talking to some police officers who are one of them was a polygraph expert. The way that it goes these days, they don't barrage you with question after question after question. But in Chris's case, they asked him, I think he said it was 31 or 34, I think 31 questions. And only on one of them did the polygraph examiner conclude or believe that there was an untruthful answer. On the other 30, he was fine. The other thing is that they sprung the polygraph without any warning at 8:30 one morning when he was brought into a room that was cameras, officials, people. This is all arranged by MUFON, by the way. And anyway, Chris had he was very unhappy with this. And when you hear him talk about this, I really think, he was railroaded in the MUFON investigation. That's really what comes across. But all of the other things about Chris's case, I think, lend to his credibility. And although the case has a lot of really, really out there elements to it, that's what makes it so fascinating. So expect part 2 of my interview with Chris, and that will be only, again, for members of this site in the next day, 2 days max. You guys are getting all this stuff first, and you'll have it for a week or two before the rest of the world sees it. And then there are certain things that I discussed with him that will only stay on this site, that are not going to go out to YouTube. So I'm always trying to get a little bit of behind the scenes, comfortable chat that I would not want to put out for YouTube, but I think is really appropriate for this site. So that's Chris Bledsoe. I was really happy about it. Also, just I think I mentioned Philip Lavelle's amazing interview that he has done. So I've released 2 parts of that. There will be a 3rd part that I'm releasing this week. I may dig into that file tomorrow and prepare that 3rd part. That needs to be heard. Philip and I, we really got into it. He got into a brilliant analysis of the destruction of the evidence after the shooting, and particularly what happened to the body of John F. Kennedy. It's interesting. The 2 videos that I put up with Philip on JFK, they're on my YouTube channel as unlisted. So that just means that when you watch them on our site, they are YouTube videos, but they're not searchable on YouTube yet. I want to make the first one available on November 22nd, so that'll be coming up. That's the anniversary of JFK's assassination, of course. But YouTube has already done a partial demonetizing of video number 2. And I just think, what is this, YouTube? So as a result of this, I'm just thinking, I was talking with Tracy and a few other YouTube people, and I think there's a really good chance I'm going to create a second YouTube channel, which will have all of the edgy things that I put up, because I'm really concerned that YouTube is going to shut down my channel without any warning. There are new rules yet that are going into effect next month that might just leave the door open for YouTube without warning to shut down a channel if they feel it's not commercially viable for them, whatever that definition is. So I think a safety valve for me for YouTube will be to create a second channel that won't be monetized. I'll just put like all those JFK stuff. I think I may just put it there. I don't need to monetize every single thing. I just want to get this information out. And if I can monetize it, it's fun, but I don't have to do that. And I just want to be able to preserve myself on YouTube streaming services for as long as possible. And meanwhile, looking into any other alternatives. If I ever do get shut down, I will have these videos uploaded to another server, and they'll all be available on our site. Like, there's no way I'm going to let all that stuff go away. And if nothing else, people on our site, this site, will have access to it, and I'll figure out what to do one step at a time. Okay, so earlier this week, I wrote a short piece on, I was just kind of thinking about this, really, the next decade of ufology. We're about to hit 2020 in a couple of, about a month and a half, a new decade. And it just prompted me to start the process of thinking, looking forward. I'm sure some of you are doing the same. The piece that I wrote is no big deal. It's, I think, less than 1,000 words, not very long. And really all that I said in that piece was I was giving my opinion here, which is that I think that 2020s are going to be an active decade for ufology. I think a lot of things are going to happen. I think that this field is out of neutral and in drive, and it's moving forward. And our society is moving in all kinds of bizarre directions, but all of which can result in very interesting developments in our field. I think that there are a number of important issues that we should always be focusing on. One thing that I've been talking about for years is finding a way to broaden international data collection. That is, in the United States, in Canada, we've got a pretty good system in place of collecting raw reports. If nothing else, you can read through thousands of raw UFO reports every single year on the National UFO Reporting Center and on the MUFON on the MUFON database. Those two alone, every year, year in, year out, to give you more than 10,000 sightings every single year, more than that. And, you know, and then there's other databases as well. Chris Rutkowski over in Manitoba and Winnipeg collects specifically Canadian cases. And there are other Canadian researchers. There's a young researcher named Ryan Stacy, who I'm really keeping an eye on. And I think he's also doing some very good data collection there. But the point is, US and Canada, it's not comprehensive, but there's a lot there to work with. Once you leave that area, it's really hit or miss. And it's not that there's not good UFO researchers in other parts of the world, but how comprehensive is the data from Brazil, from Argentina, from Chile, from any of the European countries, so even from Britain, from France? Where are the websites that you can go to, that you right now can go to get a comprehensive list of all of the sightings? I haven't kept track of all of this in the last year or two, but I don't think that there's any other comparable site that is anything like the National UFO Reporting Center that we have here in North America. I'm just not aware of any. To say nothing of sightings in Russia, China, Africa, any nation in Africa. We have to assume that there are sightings that go on there, and yet the acquisition of data in all of those parts of the world is next to nil. And to me, I look at that, I think this is what a loss of opportunity here. And not only that, it's like we are trying to deal with this incredible phenomenon that I have a tickle in my throat here, excuse me, that is obviously way, way more advanced than we are in all of the important areas of technology and maybe other areas of intelligence. You know, and we're dealing with this in the most atomized, isolated way imaginable. And we're not sharing data, really. I mean, I've been trying. This has been an interest of mine for the last several years to try to talk to ufologists from other parts of the world to get a sense of what's going on elsewhere. But we're not getting data. I would like to see numbers. I would like to read reports. I would like for us to be able to draw valid conclusions based on genuine data to work with. And I don't think it's there. It's frustrating as hell, to be honest with you. So I think international data and understanding the implications of the international UFO scene are critical moving forward through the 2020s. And I've got to think we're going to be making some progress there. We've got translation software that's just becoming better and better. It's now totally possible to go to a Chinese UFO website, and even if you don't know Chinese, you can at least fight your way through the translation. There is information in some of these places. And I think that will improve. And I would like to think that our communication with other researchers around the world should improve. I think there's a tremendous opportunity there. Another area of ufology in the 2020s has to be the science of UFOs. And when I say the science, I mean the science is dealing with the UFO phenomenon. There's just so many of them. Our forum is a good place to start that research, by the way, in terms of propulsion, in terms of space-time metrics, in terms of everything else that has to do with ufology, right on down to consciousness and all the tech, the studies of the so-called metamaterials and other materials that apparently have come into possession of our scientists. I mean, we've known about this, practically speaking, for decades, but only now are we getting closer to a point where we actually can have maybe intelligent conversations about the results of some of these analyses. There's a real chance there. You know, getting into the science of UFOs, there has been very little published really good published work on this. Starting with, say, fellow people like Paul Hill, who worked at NASA back in the 70s and wrote a very excellent posthumous book, Unconventional Flying Objects. It's a good place to start with this. But there are very few first-rate scientific studies of how these objects do what they do. But I think that this coming decade offers the possibility that that can change. And I think it needs to. We need to move ahead with this. And then there's another opportunity for the 2020s. And this is something that I hope that I can continue to participate in, which is investigating the deep elements of the cover-up. I'm going to talk about the article by Kosh in just a moment on his analysis of the Wilson document by Eric Davis. That is one significant effort along the way to getting into this. In other words, we're getting to a point, I think, more than ever before, where the information is available to us that can enable us to prove certain things about how this cover-up operates. And I don't think that we'll be in the same place 10 years from now that we are today in terms of understanding this. I believe now, I didn't believe this 10 years ago, that we would make significant progress. I really have to honestly say I didn't think. Back then I thought, in theory, yes, I could see how things can change, but I couldn't really see how things can change. And now I'm starting to see how things can change. And I think that we're getting to a point where where a genuine study of the deep elements of the cover-up really can bear some fruit. And I also think that we can do some study of, or at least engage in more intelligent efforts to promote disclosure, rather than engaging in all of the ridiculous amount of infighting that is going on in this field right now. I find it very unhelpful. When I talked to Jimmy Church this Thursday night after our AMA, it's just going to be more of the same. I mean, I'm friends with Jimmy, but I told him on the phone, and I'll tell him on the air, that he is part of the problem with some of the issues in our field. And he and I have a fundamental disagreement about the value of TTSA to the Stars Academy. And I'm just going to say it, I have come fairly definitively squarely on the side of supporting their efforts. And I've really come to the opinion that people like Jimmy, or like Dark Journalist, or John Greenwald, who are fixated on attacking these guys, are doing a tremendous disservice to our field, to the cause of truth, and are really they're making it more difficult, not less, to encourage these guys over at TTSA who need to be doing what they're doing. I firmly believe this now. So I'll probably have it out a little bit with Jimmy on the air in a friendly way. We're friends. But anyway, back to intelligent efforts to promote disclosure. I think, I don't know how yet that will formulate during the decade of the 20s, but I think it's possible. I think it's possible. And the other thing that I think could be exciting in the 2020s is utilizing new technologies that might be able to help us do investigations. Some of that actually I'm going to talk about a piece that was just published by Christopher Mellon of TTSA. I want to get into that. So, but before I do that, I just want to mention the analysis of the Wilson document by Kosh. So some of you know who this gentleman is, and some of you may not. So I'm going to share the screen here now with you, and I want you to see this is his article, and his website is the Admiral Thomas Wilson UFO document.blogspot.com/2019 / All right. Well, I'll share you the address in a minute, but you can just do a data search. Excuse me, a search on this title, the annotated Thomas Wilson UFO document, Ultimate Edition. Kosh, who is a member of our site, has done prior versions of this article, but this is where he's at right now as of November 13th. This is a long article, and I linked to it earlier this week from our site in a post. I strongly encourage you to read this. This is a very detailed, professional, extremely intelligent analysis of the document. And as you can see, it's very well organized. There's a lot here. All right. This was a lot of work for him. It will be some work for you to read. And I'll just say it's worth it. So stay with it. Go through it. I'm not going to go into the details of that here. I was thinking of doing it, but what I am going to do, since I communicate with Kosh, who, by the way, likes to remain anonymous. Look how long this is. This is a very, what he does, though, is he does a breakdown of the document, which is 15 pages, 13 pages of notes by Davis, 2 pages of a letter by Will Miller. And he identifies the names. He tells you who they are. He tells you what the relationships were, who is related to who, and with links so that you can follow up. In other words, he does a very deep analysis of this document, of the people, of the offices, the organizations that are listed in here. And I'm going to tell you, he finds a lot of not just support for the authenticity of the document, that goes without saying. There we go. But opportunities for further research to dig into the deep level of what really was going on when Thomas Wilson tried back in 1997 to get access to a special access program. Actually found learned of 4 different special access programs dealing with the ET phenomenon and reverse engineering their technology and so forth. And how he was shut down in his attempts to do that. Like, this is a very powerful, profound moment in recent American history. And the deeper we dive into this document, the more we see just how important it was. So I asked Kosh just earlier today if he would consent to doing an interview with me on the Richard Dolan show. And he agreed. So we're going to set up a day to do a deep dive through an interview into his analysis of this document. And if it takes more than a couple of hours, then we'll take more than a couple of hours. We'll see how much time we need. He wants to remain anonymous. That is his choice, and we're going to respect that, obviously. But I have spoken to this gentleman on a number of occasions, and I will just tell you, he's a very sincere, very smart, very dedicated, motivated guy. And I'm really looking forward to doing a formal, proper interview with him. And I think that you will enjoy it as well. So that's that whole thing. Let me go back to the rest of my notes here, here we go. So, let me just share you I'll give you a screenshot of the address. Hold on here. So that's it. If you want to, this is a lot to write down, but you can screenshot this and type it all in, or you can just search it out. The Admiral Thomas Wilson UFO document, Blogspot, and so forth. So there you have it. Okay. Now, the other article I want to talk to you about is something I have not mentioned on this site this week, but this is the piece by Christopher Mellon. And let me stop sharing the screen. Hold on here. And I'm going to share a new screen here. I'm not that great at this. So, all right. So, let me go to the top here. Here we go. So this is at the TTSA website. It's dpo.tothestarsacademy.com. and then / all this stuff. The article, as you see, is called Potential Sources of Information Regarding Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon. It was just published November 12th, so a few days ago. And again, this is on the TTSA website. Turns out Mellon wrote this actually back in June of 2019. This is not a brand new piece. And I just want to scroll down this article, and I'm going to read over parts of it with you. I feel this is a very, very important article, and I am shocked, quite honestly, that I don't think anyone in the UFO field is commenting on this. I will be making a public comment on this. And I guess I'll just say I did just reach out and briefly communicated with Mr. Chris Mellon about this. I think I can just say that much, and not that we talked a lot about it, but I had an interesting back and forth exchange with him about this. And it turns out, I mean, my take on him, my take on TTSA remains as it has been. These guys are calling them a CIA op is the most irresponsible and I think absolutely wrong thing imaginable. I even argued a little bit about this with Jimmy Church on the phone yesterday, and Jimmy's answer was, well, it's just, it just doesn't look good. And I'm like, you're focused solely on the optics, and you're not looking one iota at what they're actually saying and doing. So stop doing that. Stop being part of the problem, I said to him, and start being part of the solution, and actually read what they are saying and recognize what they are doing. What they are doing is really, really important. So I'm going to share a couple of statements from this article with you right now. And let's see, share my screen. I created my own tabs here. I lifted out some of the statements. So his article starts, I'm just going to read this here. In May 2019, a spokesman for the U.S. Navy stated there had been a number of reports of unauthorized and or unidentified aircraft entering various military-controlled ranges and designated airspace in recent years. End quote. He says, while this historic admission is concerning, the U.S. Navy's public recognition of the problem is an excellent first step towards mobilizing the military and the intelligence community to find answers regarding the identity of these vehicles and determine whether they pose a threat to the United States. Let me continue. Because this phenomenon has only recently been acknowledged, little, if any, effort has been made to use, quote, national technical means, end quote, for purposes of identifying or tracking these objects. This is unfortunate since there are massive stores of intelligence data already collected by U.S. intelligence systems that can be accessed and correlated with events such as the interaction of the USS Nimitz carrier battle group with multiple UAPs in November 2004, or the ongoing events in restricted military airspace off the east coast of the United States. Let me read a little bit more here, and then I'm going to comment. Regrettably, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Program, ATIP, and he gave a different, he didn't really use the acronym properly in my view, but that's interesting, was unable to obtain the cooperation required to access the systems and databases identified below due to bureaucratic intransigence. That's interesting. So the ATIP program, he's saying right here, had limited means of acquiring data on the UFOs because of bureaucratic intransigence. So therefore, to the best of my knowledge, these systems and databases represent potentially critical, unexamined sources of official information regarding the UAP phenomenon. Among other things, these vast repositories of data could yield crucial information on UAPs, including speed, acceleration, maneuverability, size, atmospheric effects, shape, and possibly even their bases of origin. Good grief. So he's saying that we have in the U.S. entire systems in place right now that could be used by responsible government agencies to track, monitor, assess, analyze, these UAP. It's an amazing thing to be saying here. Hopefully, he says, the U.S. officials charged with investigating the UAP phenomenon will receive the support needed to access and analyze data from these and other sources. Since billions have already been spent collecting the information, it seems wasteful and inappropriate not to allocate whatever modest sums may be required to help resolve vital questions regarding the origin and capabilities of the unidentified vehicles that continue to violate U.S. airspace with impunity. I think that's all I have for that at the moment. Do I have another? Yeah. And then he goes into, so let me just talk about that right there. He's got, this is that in a public statement on the TTSA website. He drops the first bomb, of course, by just reiterating what the U.S. Navy's already said, that they are continuing to have reports of UAP that are violating sensitive airspace. You know, again, for a guy like me to read this, I've been writing about this since the 1990s, getting zero response from the U.S. government, zero recognition from any of the military services that, yes, this actually happens. The Navy has now made this admission. It's extremely important. And Mellon here just opens with that, so that's very important. And what he's then suggesting is that we in the United States utilize the resources that already exist to further investigate this. And some of the language he uses, you know, words like impunity, they're just in our restricted airspace with impunity. Nothing's stopping them. The ongoing events in restricted military airspace off the East Coast of the U.S., how the ATIP program was really not able to get a whole lot of cooperation from the rest of the government here. Really no surprise, but it's interesting to get that statement from Christopher Mellon. And then talking about how there's almost certainly vast amounts of UFO data, UAP data that can be utilized. So let me talk, then he's got these collection systems in place that he's talking about that can be used. These are 6 of them. And again, there's a nice description with links to all of them. He talks about the Global Infrasound Acoustic Monitoring Network, U.S. Space Surveillance Network, the Space-Based Infrared System, the Active Electronically Scanned Array, AEGIS, and the Joint Surveillance System. And in fact, let me, I'll just show the actual websites here on his article, excuse me. And let me just scroll on down. Here we are. He's got a lot to say about each of these. This is a really important direction that he's basically telling UFO researchers and interested government people. He's saying, look at these systems. So the Global Infrasound Acoustic Monitoring Network, I never knew about this. I didn't know what this was. He says this is comprised of 50 stations operating in 35 countries that monitor low-frequency pressure waves in the atmosphere. So you think, wow, okay, great, that's interesting. Why do we need to know about this? And he explains, although built for the purpose of detecting nuclear explosions, it reportedly also has the ability to detect and track bolides and other objects transiting the atmosphere. For example, U.S. researchers have recently established that the system can monitor missile launches. You know, a number of years ago, I talked with researcher Ron Regehr, who worked for the company Aerojet that monitored launched a bunch of satellites known as the Defense Satellite Program, DSP. And these were, in Ron's opinion, ideal UFO monitoring systems. In fact, he wrote a booklet about it, and I wrote about his booklet in volume 2 of National Security State. So here's Mellon saying the same thing. There are systems that are designed to monitor missile launches, but there have long been rumors, he says, suggesting that environmental scientists participating in CIA's experimental Medea program, an effort to determine if U.S. intelligence systems could further the scientific understanding of climate change, detected anomalous objects entering Earth's atmosphere, then maneuvering at high speeds. While this may be mere rumor, contact with the appropriate officials at LLNL who operate the system may help DoD determine whether this unique capability can contribute to our understanding of UAP. I'll bet you anything it's a little bit more than mere rumor. So he just throws that right out there. Like, this is a great lead. Then he talks about the U.S. Space Surveillance Network. And I don't want to go into all of the details of all of these, but you can see he has nice descriptions here of them. Went a little bit too fast. The space-based infrared system, the active electronically scanned array, the Aegis system, this is in the U.S. Navy, and the joint surveillance system. And then he goes down into the databases that are available. NORAD's database, called the Unknown Track Reporting Database, is clearly pertinent. Almost everything in here, I think, is classified or not necessarily readily available. I mean, some of these might be amenable to FOIA requests, however. NORAD, I think, is notoriously difficult and unfriendly for FOIA, but you never know. And then there's these other, I'm bouncing around here, excuse me. I don't know how easy or difficult it would be to obtain information from them, but these are all possibilities. So Mellon just, I think, did everyone here in this field a major favor by discussing these and by pointing out directions that we can. This is one amazing statement he just writes in here. He talks about OPREP 3 reports. This is another source of information from NORAD. Distinct from NORAD. He says there have been numerous instances over the years of UAP intrusions over military facilities, some of which I can personally attest to or am aware of with one degree of separation. For example, in March of 1984, a close friend who was training to become a naval aviator called me excitedly from Pensacola Naval Air Station to relate an event involving a UAP flying circles around a United States Navy aircraft in broad daylight over the base. I'm sure he didn't say UAP either. I'm sure he said UFO. He goes on, he says, numerous incidents involving UAPs and military facilities have been reported by retired military personnel and validated via FOIA, including UAP overflights of nuclear weapons and nuclear storage facilities. Yes, of course, we know that. We just call them UFOs. Consequently, he says, a review of these cases might help shed important new light on the question of reported UAP interest in the U.S. strategic triad and nuclear chain of command. And he says, note, I have not listed undersea monitoring capabilities due to classification issues, although they are obviously highly pertinent to this question. That's interesting. And then he's talking, the last thing I'll just mention here under the section of allies, other potential opportunities. The UAP phenomenon off the east coast of the U.S. in recent years is unprecedented in terms of the number and appearance of the vehicles involved, as well as their persistence in a specific geographic region. Think about how well phrased this is, how precise the language is. And indeed, when I read it over, it seems very accurate. Like I myself think, you know, when you're talking about the events off the eastern coast involving the USS Roosevelt, 2014, 2015, according to what we read in the New York Times piece, it happened nearly daily for 9 months. That's unbelievable. So Mellon just says it suggests not only a new level of brazenness or contempt for U.S. defense and intelligence capabilities, but also the possibility that operations have advanced to a new stage towards some as yet unknown objective. This brazenness, combined with the fact that these vehicles are being encountered in the CENTCOM AOR, adds further reason to query allied nations, especially those with similarly capable radar and sensor systems, to determine the global scope and scale of this activity. What an idea! That's a great idea. He goes on, moreover, if we were able to determine either unilaterally or through consultation whether Russia or China are experiencing this uncanny phenomenon as well, it would go a long way toward winnowing the already narrow range of possibilities regarding their origin. DIA should be able to assist with this issue. Okay, there's a little bit more that I want to share here with you, but that's a bombshell. Absolutely. I mean, what he's very carefully saying here is we need to see if the Russians and the Chinese are having similar cases and encounters, because if they are, we can be pretty certain it's not them causing this. And in my own historical research over the many years, I can just tell you, I definitely concluded, especially looking at the Soviet-Russian cases, they had more than their share of UFO encounters. And there is absolutely no reason to believe that the Russians are sending their UFOs over the United States when they themselves are having the exact same types of encounters, inexplicable, over their own military bases. We don't have as many cases that have come down to us from the Russian side of it, but we have enough, and we know that they're experiencing it. And also China, to a lesser degree. China is much more unknown to us, but it absolutely does appear that China has the same situation going on. So, holy smokes. I want to read a little bit more here. I'll just pull this. I copied this, and let me share this with you. Here we go. He just writes here. Oh, I just read this to you. Let me skip by. Here we go. Oh, that is the end of it. Okay, never mind. I did read you everything. All right, let me just get out of there then. But there was one statement in there, and I just can't remember it offhand, where he's talking about how clearly, incredibly advanced these objects were. And Mellon was all but saying, we're not making these things. Like, we don't know of the capabilities of how to do these things. And, he's just putting it right out there. Like, this doesn't seem to be ours. And indeed, again, when you get these folks accusing him and the other folks at TTSA of fear mongering, I just want to shake them. I just think, how is this fear mongering? How is it anything other than, like, if you're working for the national security apparatus, like, your job is to manage the national security of your nation. Like, that's your job. And if you've got unknown objects that are loitering over sensitive airspace, I don't care how peaceful they seem to be, your job is to investigate that as a potential national security threat. Otherwise, you are absolutely dilatory and negligent in your duties. You've got to look into it. And they are clearly interested in our technology. Oh, there was one thing he said at the end. I absolutely want to share this with you. So hang on here. I'm going to pull this up. I remember where he has it. I think it's right at the end. Yeah, I'll just read through the conclusions here. I meant to copy this on a separate little file, but I think he's got this right. Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, there's been little, if any, fruitful collection in these domains against the UAP objects themselves. Whoever is designing and operating these craft has wildly surpassed the U.S. in aerospace technology, and their communications technologies are likely to be equally radical, unfamiliar, and more highly evolved. That's what I was looking for. He says, I use the term evolved deliberately because if Darwinian principles are as universal as gravity, and the intelligence designing these craft is the product of a far longer and more rigorous evolutionary history, then by necessity they would most likely have had to place a premium on concealment in order to survive. Much as Dr. Hal Puthoff's patented quantum communication signals cannot be detected by conventional EM systems. Whatever technology they are using is likely to be impervious to our detection and intercept capabilities. This is also one likely reason that to date, the SETI project has not borne fruit. A chilling corollary to this logic is that at this point in this universe's evolution, civilizations that broadcast in the clear do not last long. Hence, perhaps the long silence for SETI. That's interesting. And then he just got a little bit of a conclusion here. These are intelligent questions that he asks. He says, aggressive tactical collection to obtain better optical, I don't know what this acronym means. Someone can help me out. MASINT and other intelligence is necessary, but older data that can provide a time series perspective may help answer vital questions, such as, are different kinds or types of vehicles associated with different locations, timeframes, or types of targets? This is the kind of thing that a large international database would be really helpful for the rest of us researchers. We could do it with the North American stuff that's available, but it would really be nice to get this on a global scale. He says, are we dealing with potentially multiple or even competing actors? Then, is there a pattern that suggests an ongoing effort to monitor the U.S. strategic triad or nuclear command and control? Is there a pattern that suggests an effort to monitor U.S. weapons development and deployment? Is there a correlation between advances in U.S. tech and the presence of UAP? And on and on. So there he goes. So that's Mellon's very interesting piece. I want to share that with you. I think it's very mature, it's very smart, really well put together, and it's being totally ignored. Totally just by the boards. I want to find him, and maybe if he will consent to an interview, I would like to interview him. I think it would be useful. I'm sure you would agree. Same would go for Lou Elizondo. I'm going to try to find him, reach out, and see if I can get to talk to him. I'm curious what these guys are up to. And, you know, my feeling about what they're doing is their efforts could very well fail, or they could very well be stalled at some point. I don't think that if this is an op, this is a really badly done op. This is not, they're not, pardon me, being particularly successful at scaring the public. They're not being particularly successful at generating money at all from the government for whatever UFO programs they're trying to do. I'm just not seeing it, not feeling it. And if it is an op, show me some evidence, man. I'm talking to dark journalists. I'm talking to John Greenwald. I'm talking to Jimmy Church. I'm talking to anyone else who really thinks that this is. They have come up with, as far as I can see, zero evidence that would point to that. They simply come up with the fact that, oh, wow, it's a lot of CIA people. And actually, it's not a lot of CIA people. You know, there's basically Jim Semivan, and it's not clear to me how prominent a role he really plays in all of this anyway. Prominent people are Mellon, that's obvious, Elizondo, and maybe even Tom DeLonge. Semivan? Has anyone really found anything that he's done? There were rumors that he was the person that was responsible for getting the article in the media, and I think that's not true. I'd bet anything that that's Mellon. I think he's the one with the connections. I think he's the one who's driving this forward. So CIA, no, I think that's probably really wrong. I think that's a really non-subtle, non-sophisticated way to look at what they're doing. And so anyway, I don't want to make this the TTSA show every single week, but what they're doing is super important. And they have put themselves in the front row in dealing with legitimate issues that are relevant to disclosure. And so they need to be looked at and they need to be studied, and what they're saying needs to be taken in consideration. I think what Mellon recently wrote or published is first-rate thinking on the UFO subject. And I'll post a link to the article. I think it deserves a little bit of attention. I would love to see a conversation about it. So what else do I have here for the my notes for tonight? I think that's everything. Yeah, that's all that I've got. We're going to do our AMA. I'll put up a post to give you a little bit of time, but that's going to be Thursday, 7 o'clock Eastern. And I look forward to that. Tracy and I will be here for that. Do I want to talk about Manchester? What I'll be doing there is I'm working with a production team, and we're going to be doing a significant video undertaking that will take a little bit of time, and that's why I'm going there. This is not with any kind of cable network. It's nothing like that at all. But I like these people. I'm going to work with them for this period of time. We're going to create some video that features myself, features me, and you'll see it before very long. It'll be out there. I like what they've got going on there. So that's what's going to happen. That's why I'm going to Manchester, and Tracy's coming with me, and we're just going to make it happen while we are there. As I mentioned, at the December 7th event in Manchester, I think we've got a post for it, or I'll make sure there's a post for it, and you can go check it out. If you're in the UK at that time, come see us. That'll be great. Okay, I'm sure there's stuff I'm leaving out here, but I've been going for more than an hour now, so probably a good time to cut this off. Hope you are having a good day and evening wherever you are. It's getting a little cold here up in Rochester. We've had our first snowfall, and it's getting cold, but we're staying warm, and I'm looking forward to this week. I've got a lot for you for this week, and yeah, look forward to that interview I'm going to do with Kosh, and I'm going to drop some more of the segments with Philip Lavelle and JFK and Bledsoe, and I'll probably going to do a couple of off the cuffs and write things that are on my mind. All right, that's it for now. Catch you next time.